Well, my name's Tanner Forbes. I'm a wildlife student here, and I spent my summer up in Minnesota at the Shute Wildlife Sanctuary. And the sanctuary is run by the American Bear Association today, and it is right up here in the very corner of Minnesota. It was about an hour and a half from the Canadian border. And so the sanctuary started around the 30s and 40s when a man named Vince Shute was logging out there. He had a pretty severe bear nuisance problem, and he solved this for a number of decades by shooting the bears and putting them down, but he decided to change up his ways in about the 70s and started feeding the bears. They're wild black bears, so we obviously know now that feeding wild animals is never okay, especially wild black bears, because they'll usually become a nuisance bear. But this was continued for a number of decades until the 90s, and Vince decided he was getting towards the end of his life, and he thought that he wanted to protect the bears from the large amount of bear hunters up there, and so he helped establish a sanctuary to protect the grounds on private land. And so my objectives as a wildlife intern was to protect wildlife and habitat on the grounds, that facilitate the education on black bears in the environment, as well as execute the pre-existing supplemental feeding program. So for a number of years, managers who have come and went have tried to taper off the amount of food that they're putting out for the bears. But as these programs start being put in place, they get more and more reports of nuisance bear activity in the area. So they haven't been able to figure out a way to stop the feeding as of yet. And so they maintain the sanctuary to facilitate the education. We have a nice observation deck with lots of educational displays. And the interns, as I'll get into later, will educate the public on bear bio and things like that. And so basic layout of the sanctuary, this area you see here is called the Magic Circle. It's a 2-acre area, kind of mostly open meadow like this, and then we also have an observation deck up here, as well as a tool shed with all of our equipment, a food shed where we have the bear food that we mix, and a cook shack where we take breaks and make our meals and things like that. And this is the only area that we feed. About a mile up this dirt road, we have our cabins that have no electricity, running water, internet, that kind of thing. And then another mile up, we have our pole barn, which stores most of the food over winter and during the season. And so my day was split up into 2 different areas, pre-public hours and public hours. Before public hours started, which was 5 to 8 p.m. every day except for Monday, we would do bear chores, which includes feeding, obviously, as well as scooping scat and maintaining the bear logs. So we'd watch and maintain logs of activity, special things that were going on. We also did lots of maintenance since we're out basically in the middle of the woods. The closest town is about 15 miles away. And so lots of things break. Many things are donated. We had to repair many gate doors, as well as the screen doors on the gift shop, as well as maintaining trails out in the woods, because we would feed about 25 yards outside of the meadow. And we want to keep that 10-foot distance between us and the bears at all time. And so we have lots of routes to go, lots of different options. And then once we were finished with those 2 sections, we were allowed to work on special projects, which were individual things that we come up with on our own that we thought would help better the sanctuary and its mission. And so during public hours, all the interns and the staff were divided up each day into different areas. So you could be on deck, which would be up here, and you would be educating the public on bear biology, bear activity that you see going on, as well as safety in bear country. Gift shop, which was that building right there, as well as parking and admissions up at the parking lot near the cabins, keeping track of how many people come in. You could drive the bus and give a bus talk, giving a basic introduction to the sanctuary and what you might see that day, as well as doing the basic feeding routine. So bears are diurnal creatures. We saw about, towards the end season, probably 60 to 80 bears will come in during public hours. And so this is just a couple photos. This is the parking lot area. 2 donated buses that like to break on us pretty frequently, so we had to deal with that very often. This is the inside of the food shed where we hung out to feed the bears. And these are the buckets that we carried around. 5-gallon, they got to be about 30 or 40 pounds. And then this is the admissions and education area up by the parking lot. And so how did I contribute as an individual intern? This is mostly special project work that I did. So I worked with another intern on website improvements. The website was made by a volunteer. Needless to say, it did need a lot of formatting and improvements. And so I helped organize and gave them a proposal of what the website could look like to give visitors a better picture of what they would be seeing if they came, as well as overview on bear biology. The salt from the food that we put out would often destroy lots of places that the bears would walk around the feeding sites, and so me and a couple interns worked on restoring that soil and helping it grow grass again. We also made, as a group of interns, a proposal for the board, which is 3 parts: land management for the other 500 acres of the sanctuary, education proposal for the deck displays, and general for living quarters and things like that. And I helped proofread that as well as write the education and general areas. And I had a general positive attitude. Lots of people got very stressed out, and I could help cheer people up when things with the board would get sticky. The days were hot, the bugs were awful. And then I was one of the 3 interns who were chosen to be on the vehicle insurance for the sanctuary out of about 10 or 11 interns throughout the summer, and so I was in charge of driving interns up and down, manning the trucks and the buses and things like that. And how did Warnell help me? Soils and hydrology helped me a great deal with this soil restoration project that we worked on. We had a mixture of old decomposed soil and bear manure, as well as extra soil and clay and water and corns and oats that we put in to try to restore that soil. We had a good bit of weeds growing up, but there were a couple of grasses sprouting by the time I left, so hopefully that will be better. Throughout the season, vertebrate natural history helped me a great deal with identifying species. Black bear is pretty easy, but there are also timber wolves that we saw, as well as lots of different bird species like pileated woodpeckers and ruby-throated hummingbirds, white-tailed deer, obviously. And then writing instruction, we all know how many writing assignments we have and the great writing instruction we have. And so that practice really helped me do a great job on the board proposal and proofreading grammatical structure. And does anyone have any questions for me?